Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering the news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, and these are our news. The Pope visited Kazakhstan to take part in the Congress of Religions. He has reminded that religion must serve world peace. The Fourth Assembly of the German Synod was held in Frankfurt, Germany, which agreed to respect the sexual identity of the church employees. A group of German Catholics faithful to the true faith have organized themselves to confront the heretical drift of the majority of the church in their country. The Bishop of Regensburg, one of the few who consistently voted against what was approved at the German Synod, has made some very critical statements about what happened. The Auxiliary Bishop of Managua in exile, Monsignor Baez, has expressed his concern for his colleague who is under home arrest. The Pope participated, like one word, in the World Congress of Religions. In his speech, he rejected the fundamentalist manipulation of religion.
The Pope made his remarks during the inauguration of the 7th Congress of the Leaders of World and Traditional Religions. The Pontiff spoke of universal brotherhood, of the role of all religions for harmonious coexistence, of religious freedom for all, and condemned fundamentalism and proselytism. In his speech, the Pope also referred to the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic and deplored the existence of wars. He didn't forget to call for greater attention to migrants and to combat climate change. On the last day of his stay in Kazakhstan, he met with the Catholic community in the country's capital, Nur Sultan. All the Central Asian bishops were also present. Let us not tire of bearing witness to the essence of salvation, to the newness of Jesus, the Pope said. The faith is not a beautiful exposition of things of the past. This would be a museum, but an ever-present event, the encounter with Christ that takes place in our lives here and now. For this reason, faith is not communicated by merely repeating the usual things, but by transmitting the newness of the gospel.
The German Synod gathered in Frankfurt held its Fourth Assembly. A group of bishops succeeded a vetting document in favor of changing the sexual morality.
The Fourth Assembly of the German Synod held in Frankfurt was much more controversial than anticipated. Already on the first day, when the document calling for a change in the Church's sexual morality was to be voted on, 21 bishops, a third of the episcopate, prevented its approval. The reaction of the other bishops and the vast majority of the lay people who had supported the document was very harsh. Many threatened with abandoning the assembly. The president of the episcopate, Monsignor Batzing, bishop, criticized the bishops who had not accepted it for not having spoken out against it earlier. On the second day of the assembly, a document calling for women's access to all the ordained ministries was to be voted on. To avoid a repetition of the previous day, Bishop Batzing agreed with the conservative minority that the document would merely request the Vatican to re-examine the possibility. Faced with the growing discontent of the majority of the assembly with the conservative bishops, the leaders of the assembly decided to change the voting system, which until then had been secret. They changed to voting by a show of hand, so that everyone could know what each one was voting for. With this way of voting, the third and fourth documents were approved, with only 8 bishops opposed and 8 others abstaining. The third approved document called for not selecting or rejecting church employees, including catechists, by their sexual orientation. Among other things, the document states that sexuality between persons of the same sex, also conducted in sexual acts, is not a sin that separates from God and should not be judged as evil in itself. Homosexuality, the document adds, is a minority natural variant of human sexuality, and as such does not choose itself and cannot be changed. No homosexual person should be denied priestly ordination or ecclesiastical offices.
Faced with the heretical drift that takes place in Germany Catholic Church, a group of Catholics has organized. It is called New Beginning.
New Beginning is the name of an association of German Catholics who want to remain faithful to the Church and reject the heretical drift of the majority of the bishops and Catholic lay people of their country. At this time, it's made of more than 7,000 people. Following the Fourth German Synod Assembly, they have issued a public message criticizing what was approved there. They also denounced the emergence of a schismatic German national church. From now on, they assert, believers who identify themselves by the abiding faith of the Church are abandoned by the majority of German bishops. How are they to put their trust in their bishops when most of them deny the truths to be believed in virtue of the divine and Catholic faith and have seriously damaged, if not broken, communion with the whole Church? The current decisions, they add, put priests in a precarious situation. Even if a priest or a religion teacher presents the Church's binding ethics, if he defends it in catechesis and preaching, may be subjected to disciplinary proceedings. The human treatment to those bishops and lay people who are on the way of the progressives have been shocking and intimidating. Ironically, those who constantly claim for a sensible language and fear-free spaces for the minority positions did not shy away from insults and threats. To top it off, they claim it was even denied the option of the secret vote, the essence of the democratic tradition, to better identify the deviants and put them in line that they could offer reprisals.
The Bishop of Regensburg, Monsignor Boderholzer, has been very critical of the documents approved in the German Synod. He is one of the few who voted against.
I am increasingly aware that the synodal way, says the bishop, suffers from the fact that at the beginning we did not agree on what we mutually accepted as a theological argument. In his declaration, Bishop Boderholzer denounced that those who spoke out against the progressive line drawn up by the majority were expelled from the work sessions or were forced to leave them. The basic direction was fixed, he says, so we had to feel expelled. Auxiliary Bishop Werner at Synodal Forum 1, Cardinal Walkie and Bishop Hank at Synodal Forum 2, myself at Synodal Forum 3, Bishop Oster at Synodal Forum 4, and Auxiliary Bishop Swasserlap left Synodal Forum 4 for this reason. It's important for me to show that this is not due to the quality of our arguments, but to the preliminary decision not to accept anything that is not obvious to the autonomous reason. However, this is not just a new theology that starts to dissolve in a free of revelation philosophy, but also the foundation of a completely different church.
Monsignor Baez, Auxiliary Bishop of Managua, in exile, has shown his concern for Bishop of Matagalpa, who is in house arrest.
The Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Managua, Bishop Baez, expressed his concern for the situation of his colleague, Bishop Rolando Alvarez, who has been under house arrest in Managua since August 19th, without having been charged, and of whom he demanded his release. I am more concerned every day for my brother bishop, Bishop Rolando Jose Alvarez, wrote on Twitter Bishop Baez, who is out of his country since 41 months by Pope Francis's decision for security reasons, precisely to prevent what happened to Bishop Alvarez from happening to him. I joined the people of God demanding to see Bishop Rolando, to know where and how he is, and that the dictatorship, in allusion to the government of President Ortega, release him. Pleaded the auxiliary bishop of Managua. I beg the church throughout the entire world to join in this demand, he added. Alvarez, 55 years old, bishop of the Diocese of Matagalpa, apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Estili, was kidnapped by police agents of the Episcopal Palace along with 4 priests, 2 seminarians, and a cameraman after being confined for 15 days.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to reflecting on what has happened in the German Synod and the consequences for the Church.
The session of the German Synod held this week has shown the spirit of its organizers. I'm not talking about the objectives. They have been very clear from the beginning. I'm referring to the character, to the way of being, to that of what they brag about and they lack, and that is called tolerance. They have got to a point that I think it can be said without exaggerating that the Nazis have returned, if they were ever gone. The Synod, this session of the Synod that has lasted for 4 days, started with a surprise. A document was being voted in the first session calling for a radical modification of the Church's sexual morality. Practically all of the lay people and bishops were in agreement. But a small minority, a significant one, a third of the bishops against all forecasts, voted against. And that, according with the regulations that the Synod imposed to itself, meant that the document would not pass. The outrage was huge. The anger was immense. The president of the German bishops, Bishop Batzing, even said he didn't see that coming. It's his phrase. He didn't see it coming, that is to say that he had not anticipated that there would be a group of 21 bishops who were those who rejected the document, that such bishops existed and that they were willing to vote against. He didn't see it coming. Why? Because the majority of the bishops are so scared that they prefer to remain silent during the debates. He showed his anger, his disappointment, and in that same line spoke his alter ego, Cardinal Marx. Well, then the lay people threatened even with immediately leaving the synodal assembly and with, of course, abandoning the church and generating a massive church disenfranchising campaign, the first session. In the second session, and in order not to repeat the issue and also voting on the female priesthood, the document expressed that there was the need to go for the female priesthood and not for deaconate, which is a trompe-l'oeil. Everyone knows it's nothing more than an excuse to achieve the goal, priesthood and then women's episcopate. Well, as it was anticipated that something similar could happen, Batzing gathered all the bishops behind closed doors and proposed them a transaction. Instead of approving a document that said that the female priesthood should be established, the document said that they were going to ask Rome to study the possibility of approving the female priesthood. That's not much, because Rome has been requested that dozens of times and since a long time. That document was a watered down one, was approved without any problems. It didn't have an actual practical signification. And there is where the inflection point occurred and where they showed their dictatorial spirit, and I would even say Nazi, because that's what they did. Not just them, communists also, both were very similar, but we're talking about Germany. Immediately after they reached an agreement watering down the document calling for female priesthood, the lay people pressured, and then on the fly they made changes to the assembly's voting rules and decided that from that moment on, voting would stop being secret and had to be a show of hands. That is to say, it had to be made publicly. That small, important, and sufficient group of conservative bishops immediately dissolved. Of the 21 for the following two documents, remained 8 who publicly voted against and 8 abstained. The other 5 voted in favor. That document, the third, was a document in which it was stated that there would not be any type of reprisal toward church employees, religion teachers, and maybe priests living in a way contrary to what establishes the Catholic morality, that is to say, homosexual relationships with their couples or cohabitation relationships. It was approved by broad majority, and the other was a document in which the creation of a permanent synodal council was approved by a vast majority of liberal subjects, lays, and bishops, almost everybody, that will coordinate the application of the synod both in the diocese, as it will have a coercive nature over the diocesan bishops and certainly over the parishes. From now on, that synodal council will be the one governing the German church, I insist, both over the diocese and the parishes. It's clear what those who changed the secret vote for the public vote pretended. It is evident that what some wanted and also what the others saw coming. Truth be told, in my opinion, right, the 21 should have been ready for martyrdom, but no, unfortunately, they were not. But we must realize what they were facing in the minds of everyone was the recent past of many places of the church. For example, churches burned down in Chile with absolute impunity, and nothing happens in that country. The attacks against the church in Argentina, where when the day of the female worker comes or any other allegedly feminist demonstration, it appears published in all the newspapers, in all mass media, nothing happens. Allegedly, those are groups enraged by the high cost of living or LGBT groups. But in reality, they are professionals, paramilitary paid, professionals in all that. And nothing happens. This, which we have seen and continue seeing in countries such as Chile and Argentina, has been happening in a lower level and for a long time also in Germany. The public condemnations, the harassment against priests, bishops, even going to the churches when Mass is being celebrated unless they are liberal priests or bishops. In Belgium, the previous conservative archbishop, not the current, but the previous conservative, had to endure having a cake smashed in his face during a conference. And of course, on everyone's minds, on that of all who promoted this, and in the minds of all who have been scared, on everyone's mind were things much more serious than a pie in the face. I'm talking about the absurd accusations against Cardinal Pell, which held him in jail for more than a year, or the recent even more ridiculous and absurd accusations against Cardinal Ouellet by a woman saying that in public the Cardinal placed his hand in her lower back without specifying the height of the lumbar vertebra in public in front of everyone. And now, 40 years later, the woman remembers it and she says she's very upset. Everyone knows in the church at this time what they face if they dare to defend Catholic doctrine in Germany in the first place, or in a special way, at least. Nazism, if it ever was gone from these groups, Nazism has returned. Anyone daring to go against what this violent majority is determined to do, and thus will be persecuted one way or another, even to the point of slander or defamation, doing everything possible to destroy that person, and if not, just ask the Cardinal of Cologne. The matter is very clear. They will not back down. They will continue their path. They will apply it. And now we must ask first, what will the lay people do? What will the German Catholic lay people do if they encounter a religion professor, a catechist that is teaching a moral doctrine contrary to that of the Church? If they are teaching it to their children, preparing for their first communion or confirmation, what will the lay people do? What will the lay people do if they go to Mass and in the homily the priest teaches and explains doctrines contrary to those of the Church? Or even if the priest has a partner and comes out with a partner to greet everyone at the end of the Mass, what will the lay people do? Will they leave the Church? Will they stop contributing the religious tax? And if so, they will not be able to request a funeral. They will not be able to take their children to catechesis, request the first communion or the confirmation. But then again, what catechesis will they be taught? What deformation, I'm not saying formation, but deformation will be taught if it's not being taught already? What will the lay people do? And what will the priest do if the bishop forces them to give the communion to someone who, in conscience, they believe cannot receive it? Or if, for instance, in their parish is created a layman's commission that demands to review their homily and censors those things the priest would want to say, but goes against all this theology of adaptation to the worst of the world. And what will the Vatican do? What will the Holy See do when all this starts to be implemented? This is not just a matter of let's see what happens. No, it's being approved, and in addition, they have decided to execute it. They have created an organization, a permanent synodal council to execute it. There are bishops who will implement in their diocese even those matters that were not approved, such as the ones occurred on the first day with all that issue of the church's sexual morality, or that on the second day about the female priesthood. What will the Vatican do when all this happens? The president of the Young German Catholics has just made some remarks saying he's within this vast majority group of the Synod, that they don't want a national German church. But there will be no choice if the rest of it, the universal church, does not advance with them, not just allow them to do what they want, but if they do not walk along with them, if they do not imitate and follow their example. This is the situation, and it's placed, I repeat, in front of everyone's eyes with absolute clarity. Either a schism is faced in Germany, perhaps also in Belgium and possibly Switzerland. I don't think much more, but certainly in these places a schism is faced with all the consequences, or on the contrary, this virus of heresy is allowed to spread throughout the church, because to the extent that they are allowed to do what they want with impunity, as in some things they have been doing, to that extent many in many countries will say what that old saying says: silence implies consent, and doing nothing will be interpreted by many as a kind of approval. Therefore, there will also be those who, wherever, sometimes at bishops' conference, sometimes at dioceses, or sometimes at parishes, will imitate them. The spirit of these dictators has appeared. There is no tolerance. Anyone not voting as they wish publicly better be prepared for persecution. Let's pray the Lord for the strength of the martyrs to love and defend him the way he deserves to be loved and defended. Until next week, God willing.
If you wish to be up to date about what is happening in the church, you can visit our news page, www.magnificat.tv. See you in 2 weeks, God willing.